I got to add, one of the major sponsors of this podcast is Back to Basics Putting Mirrors, talking about Grant Field. One of the designers alongside Richard Woodhouse, used by Cam Smith and the lot. Support the people who support the podcast. Link below, TM15, get your 15% off. What I believe is one of the best putting mirrors out there for you to use. You can fit it in your bag. The new model I'm holding up right here, people, on YouTube. A little bit smaller, a little bit more easier to kind of get around, and it's going to be a little bit more cost effective as well. So TM15 gets you 15% off. In the Back to Basics putting segment we have here, right, guys, is I'd like to get something from each individual one of you, and Dom's done this one, and we might start with Dom. Can you give me your number one tip, or a tip around about putting, or something that the recreational golfer or the professional golfer who's listening to this can take to use next time they go?
Pretty good timing, Toby, because I've been doing a lot of work with Karis Davidson, I work with on the LPGA Tour. Spent 2 weeks with her in LA and then Phoenix, doing a lot of work around tempo and obviously how that relates to speed control.
Yeah.
Had a little tool, Blast Motion, that I put on Herbie's putter yesterday for the first time, that measures tempo very quickly and easily.
Yep.
Was it first 18 or 19 putts?
Yeah.
2.1 to 1 tempo every time. Like, it was phenomenal how consistently he, obviously that's measuring backswing time and matching it to time from top backswing back to the ball. And the consistency he had around his tempo and the time taken for that backswing and then backswing to ball strike was just so spot on.
I've asked you this before on this segment. What do you mean when you say 2.1 to 1, just for people listening? What do you mean about that? What does that mean? What are you measuring?
So your backswing time. So and this is, I always want to be careful with this. So rule of thumb in the golf industry, we talk about the time taken for your backswing. So it might be 0.8 of a second. Right, and then the time taken from that backswing to get the club back onto the ball should be about half that, 0.4 of a second. So Great. 2 to 1 backswing to then backswing to follow through. So Herbie was 2.1. So he was basically, let's say, 0.82 to 0.38 back to the ball. So slightly more. I was lucky enough to go to Scotty Cameron with Herbie a couple of weeks ago. Also went with Karis to Ping. We talked a lot about tempo at both facilities. Talking about most good putters are between sort of 2 to 2.3. So Karis was up around 3. So really out of sync. She was having a lot of trouble consistently controlling speed. From, say, she'd be doing a good job Thursday, and then by Saturday morning she's hitting them all a little bit too far past. So just that consistency around speed control, and that's where I'm doing a lot of work at the moment around just being very consistent with that tempo ratio.
Yeah.
And then if you create a lot of consistency there, how that ties into much better speed control day in, day out for your average golfer who's listening.
Yep.
From when they play on a Wednesday and when they play next Saturday, sometimes I had really good speed control on the Wednesday, Saturday no good. Right, why was that? Did that tempo change from one day to the next? So, that might help some of your club golfers that might be listening, is to really pay some attention to the ratio between time taken with backswing and then back to the ball, because if that's changing dramatically, you're going to really struggle with your speed control. And you add into that, obviously, uphill putts, downhill putts, speed of the greens change from day to day, moisture due on the greens in the morning, up and into the grain, down grain. There's so many factors. Now, if you're adding another factor to that, and that's the speed of your hit, you're going to be really struggling with your consistency of speed control.
How can, for the mere mortal out there that doesn't have the, I think you use Capto, how can they measure this? How can they measure their tempo?
I actually the guys at Ping put me onto this Blast. It's called Blast Motion, and you can actually order them on Amazon. And I'm thinking they're about $260 Australian. And it's this tiny little thing you put on the top of your putter.
Mm-hmm.
Sign up the app for Blast Motion. I'm selling, should be selling Grant's Back to Basics mirror, which
No, you don't have
use
to.
at the time. Great device, but mate, because you're right. Capto we all use, TrackMan putting. There's all these great devices that measure this tempo plus a heap of other things, but they're thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
$260 Australian for this tiny little light thing that you put on the end of your putter grip, connect it to an app within 3 seconds, really. It takes that long, and gives you feedback around tempo. Now, it also gives you other feedback parameters, but I just use it for that tempo because I just think it's so simple, so important for the average putter, let alone someone like Herbie. It was just really interesting yesterday when I put on Herbie's putter. It was just phenomenal how consistent, how good he was. And, I wasn't surprised, but I was blown away by just how good it was.
I've said it on multiple times on this. We've been lucky enough to be blessed with the two of the world's best putters, and they're from Australia, Cam Smith and Lucas Herbert. It's pretty crazy, right? It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny, and I said to Pugh, this little device, I'm going to give it to them so that if I'm not at an event, because occasionally Herbie will walk off, a Saturday at a live event, and he's like, I haven't putted great. It's like, guys, put the device on, let's just measure. And I think you'll find that, geez, you're a little bit hitty today, mate. Let's just get that tempo back.
Interesting.
So I noticed when Herbie putts really well, his speed control is so perfect because it's easier, obviously, to match to your read. If you're reading a 10-foot putt that's, right edge, well, that's only right edge at a certain speed.
Yeah.
So if his speed's out fractionally, that's enough to leave it on the edge and lip it out or break across the front of the hole, depending on the slope, So, I'm always looking at things that I can have Herbie use that just, keep him within parameters, make sure that he's always putting it really well. And for him, it's a lot of his tendencies when he doesn't putt great around his tempo, perhaps. It's one of probably the two or three things that he can get a bit hitty. And, this is just a device that I'm sort of adding into his training that's going to allow him more consistent around his tempo.
Can calibrate himself. All right, Pugh, when I switch to you, right, for the Back to Basics putting segment here for your tip, I want to ask you a question before we get... Sorry?
Mine will be shorter.
But that's okay. I want to discuss with you, Pugh, and I've seen you do this, and I've seen you... I forgot what it's called. You use this kind of channel pyramid thing that comes down. Can you explain to listeners what this is? Can you do a better explanation of what I've just said? And I've seen some crazy videos of you doing it and it giving us different results.
It'll look like a little mini roller coaster for golf balls. It's a metal ramp is the best way to describe it. It's from a company called Perfect Putter in the US, and it's just a way of rolling a ball consistently. And people use it for a lot of different things. I use it to find the perfectly straight putts, if you will. So on the putting green, I'm trying to set up. Following on from what Dom's just talked about there, the reason why Herbie is so good at putting and the reason why his only sort of weakness is the difference in his tempo is because his fundamentals are so good and because his stroke is so in ground. And the reason why it's one of the best putting strokes in the world and most repeatable is because of the way that he practices. So that's not by fluke. That's not just that he was gifted as being a good putter as a kid. It's years and years of brilliant work that Dom and Herbie have done to create this almost foolproof way of practicing. So I find a straight putt on the putting green. Yeah. We then construct what looks like some kind of torture chamber of tees where he has to use the putter to hit putts through this sort of channel, which your average golfer would look at and think, oh, that looks pretty difficult. They'd try and do it, and the success rate would be zero. Like it's that difficult.
Is that tight?
But because Lucas has done it for the last 5, 10, however long you guys have been doing it for, it's the best way for him to practice his putting on a daily basis. So I use the Perfect Putter just to roll golf balls down. It has a laser attached to it, and I can literally find the perfect straight putt on any putting green.
Can you share with me a story though on I want the listeners to listen, especially the recreational golfer, about how putting greens aren't perfect even on the PGA Tour. So you're uploading videos from, let's call it Live Tour, the main tours in the world, and you're using this contraption, the ramp, right? And the ball's going down. Some of them are going in the hole, some of them missing the hole. How often does that happen?
That happens every single week. It doesn't matter where we are.
Every week.
It doesn't matter whether we're Augusta National or we're at the local Muni or wherever you are. Golf greens are not perfect. They're not made of granite. There's a reason why when you go to Ping and you do things on there, it's on a granite slab. That's the perfect surface. On a putting green, because of the way the grass grows, because it's so irregular and because it's a moving, changing, evolving surface, there's no such thing as a perfect putting green. Now, we've been very fortunate to go to some incredible golf courses, and there's some courses where you'll roll balls down and 4 of them will go straight in the middle of the hole. The laser basically points at the middle of the hole, so as you roll a ball down, if the laser stays on that golf ball as it rolls down this sort of line towards the hole, it's a pretty good surface. But even the difference between, I remember setting up in Las Vegas as the sun was coming up, and you find this perfect putt, you roll some balls down it, and you go, okay, this is a straight putt. As the sun rises and changes position, within half an hour or an hour, as that sun rises and changes, the blades of grass now sort of move and move towards where the sun is. So that putt now changes. It can change within a 10-minute spell. But even rolling 4 golf balls, you'll find that one golf ball will be rolling along the line. It'll hit a slight imperfection. That can just be the smallest blade of grass that's not growing in exactly the same direction. That'll knock it offline by point whatever of a millimetre. That now encounters another obstacle which knocks it offline by another point whatever of a millimetre. And before you know it, that ball's missed the hole left. And then you roll the next one down and that hits another chain reaction of impurities along that putt, and that one misses, on the right lip. And that's the most sobering, the most humbling experience, is rolling golf balls down that perfect putter and realising just how hard golf is. And we're literally just talking now about a 5-foot putt and how imperfectible putting is, for example. Then you can start talking about hitting a 7-iron off a hanging line, a driver, and this, that, and the other. The game that we're trying to play and trying to control is literally the hardest, most imperfectible sport that's ever been created to man. So this is just like a microcosm, just a real sort of small environment example of how frustrating golf can be. Like, I'll roll balls down this chalk line, and every ball will go in the middle of the hole, and then Herbie will turn up, 20 minutes later, or 20 minutes late, whichever one it happens, and he'll roll a putt that starts on the chalk line and then moves. And you kind of look at each other and scratch your head and go, "How's that missed?" And that's golf. You can put in the perfect ingredients, and your shot will still not succeed. So
But even hearing you talk about that, right?
Is that shorter?
Marginally.
I'm not sure it was.
But just even hearing you talk about that makes me scared to hit my next putt, because I just know, like, what's the point? And it's so funny because my father-in-law is a once-a-year golfer, right? Or once every 2 years. But he's actually just picked up now. He's retiring. And he always says to me, golf, it's a lucky man's game. He always says it to me, always. And then when I see you do those videos, I go, man, I'll tell you what, he's kind of on a little bit here. But it just, when you kind of talk about that, right? So we're talking about the ramp and the ball going down, and I think it's mind-blowing for people who want to see this, right? I'll see if I can grab a link and put it down below in the show notes when Pugh puts his up, but then the ball just kind of rolls offline and misses the hole. One might go in, then one might miss, and we're rolling it from the exact same spot.
Yeah.
Do you reckon there's anything here, Pugh, that's happening? Do you reckon there's a variance in the golf ball at all as well? Or do you think it's just the grass we're blaming here? Could we be looking at the golf ball not being perfect?
There's not a variance in the ball in the sense that, Bryson got famous a while back for putting his golf balls in Epsom salts and floating them and finding where the exact, golf balls in a certain way. We can, it depends on how deep you want to dive with this subject, and this is where my brain starts to go off on a tangent sometimes. But the dimple pattern on a golf ball, and as it's rolling down this surface, then it's not coming off that ramp exactly the same every single time. Now, when we initially, and if you can find this video, it's on Lucas's Instagram somewhere. It was a course. It was a golf tournament called the Sanderson Farms tournament on the PGA Tour, and it was a Wednesday afternoon. So to put that in some kind of context, the putting green gets more and more use Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as that week progresses,
and later in the day.
And by Wednesday afternoon, everybody's trampled all over that putting green, and there's just footprints that you maybe don't see in the naked eye. But as soon as the sun sets, we've all played golf at sunset, and you look around and you go, geez, this looks like a cricket pitch. There's just spikes here, footprints there. Compared to, and again, I do this a lot. I'm at a golf course at sun up when the greens look relatively perfect because they've been rolled and manicured and they're beautiful. And then I've also done these putting drills late at night when the sun's going down, and that surface changes immeasurably during a day. So that video you're talking about on a Wednesday afternoon, and I'm rolling golf balls down, one misses left, one misses right, one misses left, one misses right. The questions in the video were, the caddy's spinning them, or he's putting some kind of out, or he's using weighted golf balls, or he's doing this, that, and the other. Now, within a clinical environment, to get it absolutely perfect, you'd roll it on a granite surface, and you'd probably roll a ball that doesn't have any dimples on, because how those dimples interact with the roller as it goes down. All I can say is that it highlights how difficult the game of golf is, but also just how you're only responsible for, try and simplify putting in front of a putting coach, but you're only responsible for setting that ball off on the line that you've chosen at the speed that you've chosen. And once it leaves the putter face, and in this case, once it leaves my ramp as I roll it, the rest of it's down to the elements. The rest of it's down to how good is the green, what's it going to encounter along its journey, and that can be scaled up to when you've hit a 7-iron and what wind it's hitting and how it's landing and reacting with the surface. This game that we play, when you break it down into microscopic detail, is absolutely ludicrous that we expect the ball to go where we want it to go.
There are so many variables. I mean, wind isn't always exactly at 2 o'clock.
No.
Ever. And it's not always at 7 miles per hour. It's going 7, 11, down to 6. And the angle's slightly different. And you see that 12 at Augusta is like... It's just, mate, before I went to Augusta National, I used to watch the guys, some land it in the garden bed over the green, then the next group, someone landed it in the water. And you're like, how are they doing that? Is horrendous. Like, what are they doing? And then we went there and we flew one into the water and hit a perfect shot, because the wind through that section of the course is just moving so much and changing in strength that it's like cutting that ball. All you can do is, at the moment, these guys are making the decision of what club to hit. And right, we're hitting this 9-iron, we're hitting a 158 shot, and trying to land it at 143 or whatever it is. Once you do execute that, that's all you do. What happens in the air, wind, direction, up, down, whatever, you can't control. And it's the same with what Pugh is saying about, starting that ball on that line at that speed. That's all you can control. The variables in golf are what they are. And as a golfer listening in, don't be hard on yourself that you've missed. You feel that you've hit a really good putt from 6 feet and it hasn't gone in. You know what? You probably have, and that's okay.
Well, then you add on to that. Talked about the make percentage on the PGA Tour or the Live Tour, and your average golfer that's out there playing with his buddies, and he misses a 10-footer and he gets frustrated with himself, and it's like, you've actually done a pretty good job to get a 10-footer to even look at going in the hole. When you think about the science behind it, there's all the variables that are there, and then that's then, again, without being disparaging to the average golfer, but that's a guy who doesn't practice very often and whose stroke probably isn't that repeatable, and probably didn't spend that much time reading the putt because he was too busy checking out the cart girl's tits or whatever else. So you look at what goes in, all the ingredients that go into making a putt, and it's kind of head scratching as to how guys make putts at times, and then you put them in environments where they're putting for millions of dollars to win a green jacket, to win a pint of beer off their buddy, and to me that's what's so fascinating about the game, is that you can deep dive into every facet, whether it be the perfect putter we're talking about there, putting drills that we use and stuff like that. it's a fascinating sport, and that's what keeps us all in love with it over so many years. You never get bored of golf, I don't think. You might get bored of your inability to play it at the level that you want to, but I think it's a sport that, you know what, whether the PJ Tour, whether the Live Tour, whoever the governing bodies are, whether we have an official world golf ranking, whether they roll back the ball, square grooves, this, that, and the other, whatever you change and whatever you modify within the game of golf, it's always going to bust your balls. It's always going to be the hardest sport you ever play. And without sounding cheesy, one of these great life lessons. And if you can keep your head while all those around you are losing theirs, blah, blah, blah. Like, golf is such a microcosm example of how you deal with adversity and failure and success. And look, I've broke clubs over my knees. I've shouted obscenities when I've missed putts. We've all done it. But I think when you start to deep dive and understand some of the science behind what helps this do that, then it's an even more fascinating sport.
I love it. Well, and one thing to add on that right before we close up the episode, you guys have been so great with your time. And one thing I love to share, and one line that really hits well with me is like, I want you to try your hardest, but not care about the result. Simple. Like, it's such a great one to listen to, because what one to live by, because I'm going to try my absolute hardest at the best golf shot I can. I'm going to go through all my processes with Pugh. I'm going to do everything I can to the best of my ability right now, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to perform and not care what's going to happen. And that to me is when I'm at my optimized in all my parts of my life. So I love that, Pugh. I love that as well. And so to end up there on the back to basics putting segment there, support those who support the podcast. TM15, get your 15% off. Link is below. I think a putting mirror is an absolute paramount to anyone who wants to improve their putting. To, Dom and I have used the term calibration. You just kind of recalibrate yourself, see exactly where you're at, because you can measure it, you can see it, and it's such a cheap and cost-effective thing. So, yeah, it brings us to the end of the Back to Basics putting segment.